Now, Thomas Heatherwick is one of my favorite designers, and he's well known for his complex 3D geometrical designs. And over the years I heard a lot of criticism that he hasn't got deeper substance in his work beyond this 3D geometrical complexity. So in today's video I wanted to test this assumption, because if it's only the complexity that drives Thomas Heatherwick's work, then in theory I should be able to replicate his approach in quite a straightforward manner. So the first thing I'll do is I'll review a couple of his projects just to give me a sense of flavor as to what his designs are all about and what goes into them, and then the second part of this video will be me trying to replicate his design approach by creating an architectural installation project. Okay, so first let's look at his rolling bridge project. So here it is. It's a bridge that kind of goes from one bank to another to enable this canal to be free for, I guess, boats to pass underneath it. And it's quite an elaborate structure really, because this project could have been resolved in a number of ways, but Tom obviously has picked the one that's pushing the envelope of what's possible in the design. So it seems to me that the design is all about this pure geometric shape, which is then divided into equal segments that can be unrolled. It's also quite satisfying how this whole thing works when it starts to unroll. Obviously the technical resolution is what makes this project complicated, because to achieve this purity of the shape, a lot of technical ingenuity had to be employed in this, because it's quite a complicated thing to actually unroll this bridge. You can see that it relies on hydraulics to keep the shape rigid as the whole thing kind of tilts forwards. The alternative solution probably would be, if you wanted to make it a bit more straightforward, is to have some kind of like a hinged bridge principle where, you know, the two sides maybe meet in the middle. But in this particular case it was all about the shape and the innovation in the form, because I don't think that there's that many rolling bridges in the world. Okay, so let's now look at the second example, which is the British Pavilion for the Shanghai Expo in 2010. If you don't get the metaphor, this building is all about a Union Jack, and it's quite a complicated execution again in his work. This time though, the geometry, the underlying geometry is quite simple, but what makes it complicated is this execution of these rods kind of that are sticking out. And so because this is an exhibition pavilion, it wouldn't be exposed to the elements for a very long time, but obviously you can see how this shape would be totally impractical if it was to be a more permanent structure. So again, the practicality, I guess, is sacrificed for the underlying design idea, which is all about the complexity. Now there's another layer to his design, which is about putting these seeds into these glass rods, which kind of symbols the concern about the environmental challenges in the future. But I think this is just a secondary level to this whole project, and the main idea is really about this metaphor of British Pavilion resembles the Union Jack. And lastly we have the vessel in the New York. Here it is. Again, the shape is the primary driver, so you can see it's kind of like half of an egg shape or elongated sphere that he's chosen, and then it's been decorated. You know, the complexity is introduced through this honeycomb kind of structure within this simple shape. And the whole thing, the whole concept about it is that it's supposed to be a landmark that you're visiting, and it's supposed to be this arrival point. And the common criticism that this piece has is that, you know, people arrive to it and they go up these stairs and there's nothing to go to, which is a valid point, but it misses the whole kind of idea of Heatherwick's work and this particular project as well, which is that a lot of his projects are all about the projects themselves. It's the celebration of the 3D geometry and the 3D form. In this particular case, the vessel is about the experience of this shape. So you walk around not to get somewhere, you're walking around to experience the whole expanse of this creation. Obviously this is kind of my take on his design and his work. If you think that there are a couple of things that I'm missing or something that I'm not interpreting in the right way, then you're welcome to comment them below. I'm really interested to see those comments. But now is the design time. His designs so far that we reviewed, they start with a simple shape. So I guess in my design I would start with a simple shape as well. So let's see, maybe it's gonna be all about the sphere, because spheres are quite a basic shape, and I'm gonna choose a half sphere for this project that I'm gonna be designing. So let's place it in some kind of context. Perhaps it can be a park, and it can be a destination point that people can go to. And I'll have to introduce some sort of complexity, for the lack of better words. And the way Tom Heatherwick usually does it is by celebrating the structure. So it's all about how this thing is put together. So what I'll do, if I draw a section through this shape, I'm going to be using a series of bows that are kind of thicker at the top and thinner at the bottom, and there will be a floor deck that's lifted off the ground that also will have a bow type of beam that supports it underneath, and maybe a little post here in the middle that kind of supports the whole structure. And then above I'm gonna have a circular void that lets the light in. And so for scale, if I draw a person here and maybe a person here, because one thing that I noticed in Thomas's work is that a sense of scale is part of the reason why his design achieves such grandiose impression on the people. So in 3D then, if I take these individual shapes and I just place a bunch of them next to one another to create this half sphere with the opening in the middle. So I'm just stacking these next to one another like so, and then our floor goes inside there. Corresponding bows go at the back as well for each of these sections. And then this is our floor here, and perhaps there are some kind of stairs that are integrated that lead up into this shape. And so again, a human figure for scale here. On the bottom, we just have a look underneath. We have similar kind of approach, so we use this bow structure. It's like these kind of like segments that go in a circular pattern, and then they correspond with the bows that are supporting the roof kind of structure. So they go around like that, and this is the view from the underside. So on the plan, it would probably look like this. So this would be the kind of circular grid with the opening above and then stairs on either side for access. And if I wanted to draw like a presentation image, I could do that as well. Actually, what I realized is that I need to put a bit more effort into it, because currently the proposal is a bit too sketchy, to say the least. So I thought I'll spend a bit more time on enhancing some of the elements of the composition by using SketchUp. So what I was thinking is I could actually enhance design a little bit by introducing like a double curve. So I hope this is gonna make sense as we go along. So I'll extrude this by about 45 mil, and I'm just gonna try to put the floor in and the bracing structure as well. Say let's raise it by maybe 1.5 meters, the floor deck itself, and then bracing structure is kind of gonna be offsetted by 2 meters times say 4 for our bracing structure. It's gonna add like a bow boards as per our concept, add thickness to it. Now let's just extrude the stair. And yeah, I've added these fins on the bottom as well. Again, I guess just to blend in with the landscape a bit more. Alright, and there we have it. Now it's time to put this maybe in Photoshop or Procreate and then render it through. So there we have it. So we have the simple shape and then a bit more elaborate technical solution. So obviously there's all sorts of ways we can embellish this. We can maybe come up with some interesting joints, a more simpler design, a more uniform solution. But hopefully this kind of shows that even though perhaps a lot of designers like Thomas Heatherwick, Zaha Hadid, all these people who are kind of geometry focused, the reason why I like them so much is because it's not just about the 3D shape, but it's the execution of that 3D shape. It's all about the details that go into it, and it's the form, it's appreciation of like what you can do and how you can push the boundaries of the project. And so with this example, hopefully it shows that it's actually quite difficult to make the shapes that these people, these designers are making into something that's really cool and that's considerate, and there are proportions to it. So it's not all about like the final image that you kind of see and you think, oh, somebody came up with that in 2 seconds. I certainly have appreciated that a bit more by coming up with this project. Obviously, you know, I spent only probably a few hours coming up with this shape. Obviously, the Heatherwick studios probably spend like months and months on these projects. So I think the point of this exercise is to show that design can be quite subjective, and even though that sometimes people are criticizing somebody for their work, it's actually quite difficult for that person to come up with that work. And oftentimes it's more about the self-promotion skills rather than the actual design. And so the self-promotion is really the key to get yourself out there and in front of a lot of people. And I think Tom Heatherwick has done it really well, and so did Bjarke Ingels, which I have made the video on about his self-promotion technique. So I'm gonna link it right here. So check that video out, and I'll see you on the other side.